So Nvidia has a new GPU coming out most likely next week, and of course that's the RTX 4070. We're going to talk about the price that it's coming in at, and you have to be careful because they can do various things with their strategy. Should you buy the RTX 4070? We're going to talk about what we know so far, and we could know a lot because we can compare it in relation to the 4070 Ti, which it's going to share some of the attributes like 12 gigabytes of VRAM. What it's not going to share is the much higher price of $799. Of course, we had rumors that this GPU was going to come in as high as $749. That was definitely way too crazy. Now, most likely it's going to be $599. But there's more to this because even though we've seen GPUs launch at lower pricing before, a lot of times what they can do the initial launch for like reviewers and what the media sees at $599, but it doesn't mean they have to actually send any of those GPUs to the store. And then when you do go to your local store or you check online for your $599 GPU, there may be only 2 or 3 versions or copies that sell out immediately, and then you're stuck with like the $649 and the $699 and maybe some as high as $749. That's where I think that number maybe comes from. I wouldn't doubt that we could see like an Asus Strix 4070 for $749. That's not sort of the base MSRP, so Nvidia can kind of get away with it because you could say, well, you're going to overpay anyway for something that's more custom, a custom cooler. Even the 4070 Ti Asus Strix is like $1,049, which is definitely very, very crazy and way, way beyond the $799 price point. So $599 actually does make a lot of sense because then it gives the third-party AIB partners a little bit more room to go up to like $699 for a nice model or $749 for one of these really, really beefy models. That's usually what we've been seeing in the last few generations. If they started it higher, like $699, who's going to buy any 4070 when you can just buy a 4070 Ti at that point for almost the same price for like a third-party AIB model? So that's where I think they're going to come in. Should you buy the 4070? And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. So then we have to come to questions of availability. Obviously, we're not in a GPU shortage. There's lots of stuff available. The problem is people don't want to buy stuff because everything's way too expensive. So should you buy the 4070? I mean, let's say if you've been waiting for a GPU, but you've been turned off by the 4080 or 4070 Ti because of their very high prices, and that's definitely not something I can blame you for. Even on the AMD side, the new GPU started at $899 and $999. They haven't had anything in that higher mid-range to compete with these type of GPUs. So you can reasonably expect a lot of people will be interested in the 4070 at $599. But is it a good buy? $599 for some people, I think it actually kind of makes some sense as a next generation GPU. The 4070 Ti, $799 and above, I always thought was way too expensive because then that's a very high-end price and it's for a card that's very limited with its VRAM and it has various other issues. But when we start talking about the 4070, the VRAM limitation, while it's still there, it's still the same 12 gigabytes of VRAM. The memory bit bus is still pretty slow, much like the 4070 Ti. You don't expect to play nearly as high resolution on the 4070. In my opinion, and some people say the 4070 Ti is not a 4K card. What? Excuse me, $799. I'm playing at 4K if I buy that card, if I have a 4K monitor. Obviously, it's certainly more ideal at 1440p. The textures and ray tracing and everything else are going to have a less chance at that resolution of bottlenecking the VRAM, but that's an expensive GPU. And if people were playing 4K with a 3090 Ti and Nvidia is telling you that the 4070 Ti is quote unquote 3 times faster than a 3090 Ti, and you can't play 4K now, doesn't make any sense. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It's either one or the other here. Is the 4070 Ti better than the 3090 Ti or not? Is a 3090 Ti not a 4K card then? So that's not what we thought when it came out. It was a pretty high-end card, a $2,000 GPU not too long ago. So That's where I'm at with the 4070 Ti versus the 4070. Having said that, the power draw is definitely better. There's some reports that the 4070 may come in around average 186 watts, which is definitely pretty good. I mean, if you have a smaller enclosure or case, mini ITX or something like that, this can make a lot of sense because less power draw is going to mean less heat, and therefore your components are easier to cool. They're going to run at their specified, performance. So definitely some positives there. And of course, what you are getting with like a $600 4070 that you may not get with something like a 3080 Ti is going to be DLSS 3.0. For some people, this will definitely be very good. If you're the type of person that plays a lot of single player games like Hogwarts and all of these games coming out with DLSS 3 and Cyberpunk, it could really, I think, be a big benefit, and you're going to get a nice bump in frame rates compared to DLSS 2. But if you're playing multiplayer games and more competitive games and you just want the highest frames per second possible, DLSS 3 is not really going to be all that great because of latency issues, and then it's not really for you. But I think for a certain segment of the population that likes to play games more casually perhaps, or they're not really, caring about the latency, or they just want to play the latest games with, better eye candy turned on, then it's actually a pretty solid option, and it's going to be the cheapest GPU you can buy that's going to offer you that type of technology. Should you buy a 4070? I mean, it's a little bit tricky. It's going to depend. If you've been waiting for a while for GPU prices to come down or stabilize, they really haven't. You still have to spend a decent amount of money on some higher end GPUs. So this one, if it really does come in at $599, it may actually hit that spot for certain people. It's still an expensive GPU, don't get me wrong. This isn't like a $300 or $400 GPU, but then historically, if we compare it to like a 3070, which was $499, a $100 increase given everything that's going on with inflation, and of course this has more technology in it with like DLSS 3, so you can kind of justify it. It doesn't seem nearly as terrible, and at least it doesn't have 8 gigabytes of VRAM. It could have been even worse. At least it's 12, so that's definitely going to be one positive there. So right now I'm on the fence. I'm going to have to see some of the reviews when the GPU comes out. We can expect it, of course, to perform a few percentage points lower than a 4070 Ti, but I'm more concerned with also seeing the street price and availability. If it happens that most of them realistically cost $650 or $699 and above, then no, I don't think it's going to be a good buy, and it's still going to be way too expensive. But if Nvidia actually releases a good amount of them where people can actually buy them at $599, and that is the true MSRP, then I could definitely see that this will be probably the best value GPU that we've seen from Nvidia this generation. It'll be better than the 4070 Ti, definitely, and definitely better than the 4080. And then the 4090 doesn't count because that's not really a value-driven GPU for performance. It's just the best performance. So we could see the 4070, even though it's not the best, optimal value you could possibly have in relation to what Nvidia has released and just how reality is, it might be the best value until we see maybe a competitor from AMD in that price range, because aside from last generation GPUs, AMD nor Nvidia really have anything else to compete at this price bracket. So very curious to see what actually happens on the street. Remember to stay subscribed, because when this GPU comes out, I'm going to check local stores, how the launch was. $599 is actually a realistic price that people can buy it at, and we'll see if this perhaps can be the first Nvidia GPU in a while that actually has some decent price to performance. All right guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.